You're listening to the SKYLIT Books podcast. We're an independent, general interest bookstore putting great reads in the hands of people in the Los Feliz neighborhood of Los Angeles. Hosted by resident Skylighters, we're here to bring you new and exciting author conversations, group reads, and bookseller chats. Happy listening.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to the SKYLIT Books podcast. I am your bookseller host for this episode, Justin Remer. Today, we are so excited to have Ann K. Yoder with her debut novel, The Enhancers, which has been described as a dizzying, kaleidoscopic novel of three teenage friends navigating the journey to adulthood in a techno-pharmaceutical society that looks a lot like reality. That's according to Lydia Kiesling. Today, in conversation, Anne is going to be talking with author Amanda Goldblatt. Let me tell you a little bit about both of them. Ann K. Yoder's fiction, essays, and criticism have appeared in Fence, Bomb, Tin House, NY Tyrant, and Make, and has been recognized in Best American Non-Required Reading, RIP. She is the author of 2 poetry chapbooks and is a staff writer for The Millions. She writes, lives, and occasionally dispenses pharmaceuticals in Chicago. Amanda Goldblatt's fiction and essays can be found at Guernica, Chicago Review, Fence, and elsewhere. She was a 2018 National Endowment for the Arts Creative Writing Fellow and has worked with writers as a contingent instructor at Washington University in St. Louis, the University of Michigan, Eastern Michigan University, Story Studio Chicago, and Northeastern Illinois University. Her debut, Hard Mouth, an adventure novel about grief, was published by Counterpoint in 2019. Amanda lives in Chicago with her architect partner and no dog. Thanks both of you for being here. And Anne, did you want to start off with a taste of your new novel?
Sure. Yeah, great. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, SKYLIT Books, and thank you, Amanda. I will start off in the midst of things, and I will just let the text be self-explanatory. As he texted to say she needed a companion for focus, I never knew what to expect when I received these texts. Sometimes the house was empty, but more often there'd be a small crowd waiting. This time when I arrived, she gave me a kiss on the cheek and whispered that Celia was in a way. I followed her downstairs and Celia was there, curled on the couch. As he sat down beside her, "He's not worth this kind of mental spin," she said, and handed Celia a canary yellow tab. She then placed one in my hand and took another for herself. I swallowed mine and sat down on the mat on the floor facing them. As he cued the lights to dim, Celia was restless. She sat up, grabbed the vial, and tapped 2 more tabs of Tranquil into her palm. She paced the room, then took a third and washed it down with a mouth of Elite water. "Fuck him," she said. She stopped mid-sentence and just stared at the light. She twisted the antler from the chain on her neck and inhaled a pinch. I'd never seen her like this. "Oh, Hannah Azzy," she said, "you know, I've been with him sitting with his table and jesting after school, and he didn't judge when I didn't make pineapple. I was feeling really bad, you know. Anyway, we were studying energetic properties between bodies and endogenous chemical release." "I'm sure you were," I laughed, then saw her face slip. "I thought he was into me." "He was, Avi," I said. "Yeah, but you know, we took D at his father's place. He asked if I wanted to try the outdoor sauna, and Avi, yes. So we sat there in the wood house on the hot bench and our towels steam around us, and he moved up on me. We started kissing, all that. He asked if he could put it in, and in the moment, you know, the way he asked was so matter of fact. I don't even know what you'd call it. We fucked, maybe?" "How can you not know?" As he looked perplexed. "It was so good, but so bad," she said, half laughing. "Like diving for clams. I ended up with a mouthful of sand." The way she described it, I imagined their skin slipping over each other like whales, the way their mouths mingled, lingering, the hardness of his cock, long and oddly thin. She said it hung at an angle. She was so soft and small, and his body so tall and scrawny that when I tried to imagine them side by side, it seemed like he would pierce through her. "XYs are so primal," I said, and not in a good way. Like, they have this latent desire for the hunt and kill. As he glared at me and mouthed, "Stop." "Really, though," Celia continued, "he was just squirm and done." I was like, "What? Keep on." Afterward, when they dressed, he gave her a lame one-arm embrace and walked out to clean up and didn't return. She went inside and found him playing some zombie game on his device. Now he wouldn't respond to her messages. And of all things, she worried she'd done something. No response is the worst, she said. It's killing me. Her face was puffy and she was wearing comfort gear, flannel pants with hearts and bears, a black tee with a pink teardrop between the breasts, and her black hair was impressively a mess. I thought she looked gorgeous, though this was not the usual Celia look. I blamed stupid hominid mating habits. Immature males of the primate species haven't learned social responsibility. They're focused on conquering because that's what they're rewarded for. Celia had all of those endorphins kicking in. I wondered if maybe she should take some uppers even. Not that I knew. I just hoped the tranquil kicked in soon. He's just a kiwi apple with a dad on the factory board, as he said. No way he would test into pineapple on his own. Celia feigned a smile. It was no use trying to placate this away. We discussed inflicting some form of humiliation, which wasn't recommended by most of the advice offers online. Use at your own discretion, they said, but there were copious how-tos, Q&As, message boards addressing this. Where would it take place, IRL or online? Had the to-be-shamed sexted photos, were there sex shots, videos even? GIF and post was promising. The limp dick.gif, cumface.gif, etc., were more effective when, 1, his face appeared in the image, 2, he had a look of shame, and 3, the message was stated clearly.
That was so wonderful, Anne. Thank you. I think that passage of the book is a really wonderful representation of something that gives me so much pleasure in interacting with this book, with reading it, which is that it feels so intensely familiar in having been a teenage girl and just being within friendship groups, but also it is so defamiliarized by by the world building that you do, right? By the different pills, by the pineapple, all sorts of things. And it's, as always, like stunning to see and identify with something that feels or looks or appears to be so different than our shared reality. And that's something that I think is so powerful about the book, that it feels like the future and it feels like the 90s and it feels like right now, and it seems to shift. And when I first read this book, which I think was in 2020, after having heard about it for several years, I, appreciated it, but it's only gotten more relevant as time has gone on. Something that has stayed relevant throughout is this experience of teenage girls on the page, and particularly the narrator, Hannah. And I was wondering if you could start by just talking about like where Hannah came from, where she emerged.
I had wanted to write about teenage girls in a way that showed them as both intelligent and as vulnerable and like excited and like full of despair as they are, just like to fully represent them on the page. Hannah, I guess, came from a place of wanting to explore this and wanting to explore this in a novel form, and wanting to explore, like, specifically with her friends. It's important, the trio of friends within this friendship as well. And I think there's something that's so specific about female friendship as a teenager, and just the closeness of these friendships. And I feel like it's been depicted often in a short story format, but maybe less so in a novel format. And I mean, I guess just thinking about in terms of literature, Amy Binder's Willful Creatures has some wonderful stories about teenage girls and the ways that they interact. And I think also Joy Williams, I think it's Winter Chemistry, describes this really well. And so I think using that as a starting point, I thought that, it was also like, I also had the question of what is it like to come of age in this society where emotions, if you have any emotions that are unwanted, they're placated away with pharmaceuticals. And I think that there's a way that this does mirror where we are, but it's also an extrapolation of where would we be if there actually was a drug for every type of feeling that you have, or to make you feel however you want to feel. And I think some of this too comes from reading, or some of my thoughts also related to reading preliminary materials for The Theory of the Young Girl, which had come out around the time that which had recently been translated by Ariana Reins and was published by Semiotext around the time that I wrote this too. And just thinking about the young girl as the ultimate consumer, and the young girl, like in this being all of us. There's this within the book, it sets out this idea that we're all young girls in the sense of this corporate culture and of consumption. And so in that way, it's like, well, let's take the young girl that we all are and look at what's happening.
And so you have these, what I think is so sort of irresistible and also very classic is having exactly what you mentioned, this triad. You have, just to give listeners a little bit of context, Hannah is sort of the one that, at least as a reader, I found she's sort of the one in the middle. She's in some ways the most moderate. She is discovering, very much in the act of discovering. Azzy is very sexual, very free, confident. And Celia is a little bit more like spiritual, and her feelings are much closer to the surface. She's much more delicate, I think. And so you have these different sort of, they're fully dimensional and textual characters, but they're also these archetypes. And you get the pleasure as a reader of watching these different kinds of people move through this techno-pharma culture, where, just as you said, all discomfort can be addressed by a pill. And so I know that you've talked about this elsewhere, but I'm interested in perhaps we'll talk about it in a moment when we get to, because I really want to talk about structure and mode when it comes to this book. But can we talk a little bit about your, the genesis of being a pharmacist, because you are professionally sometimes a pharmacist.
That is true.
And yeah, so like, as someone who has worked many different kinds of jobs, I understand the cue of having a reality, being steeped in a very specific reality that's maybe not perfectly symmetrical with like sort of what you're quote unquote into in life, and the different ways you learn and think through what is exciting and relevant to you through your immediate reality. So I'm interested in, I guess, like, do you find that the pharma culture was that the subject of a lot of your thought in putting together this book, which you have, I want to note, been working on for many, many years, or was it something that you were interested in using as a lens only?
I mean, it was definitely something that I wanted to bring into the book, the pharma culture. Yeah, that was an intentional. It was something that I had avoided writing about completely, and I felt like I didn't want to write about being a pharmacist in my creative work. It was very just like, no, like this is my off time. I'm not doing that. And I think it was actually when I took a few years off. I was not working in pharmacy at all. I guess it's like once you leave, even though I've come back to dabble in it, but it's like having left afforded me some time to think about it, maybe in a more creative way. And I didn't have, I guess, the daily quotidian drain of going into work. So I was able to be more playful with it. And so it was actually in graduate school when I started writing this book and thinking about pharmacy and all of these pharmaceuticals, because it is this like archive of knowledge that I have that is so specific. And it kind of permeates our culture in so many ways. Just, pharmaceutical language. Everyone has seen pharmaceutical ads over and over again on TV. And so, I just thought of maybe trying to address what my take is on it. I was trying to address my own views of pharmacy, but also to be playful with it. I think also at the point that I started writing the book, I was thinking about many, many ideas, maybe in relationship to drugs and consciousness and augmentation. I was TA in a class on art and biotechnology that was taught by Eduardo Katz, who did the GFP bunny. And so was thinking a lot about augmentation and art and biopolitics. I was reading like Henry Bergson on consciousness and William James William James too on consciousness. And like I had read varieties of religious experience a while ago, but was just thinking about like, well, what is it to be, essentially a person in the world, and like, how do pharmaceuticals alter that? And I think Hannah, coming back to the friends and coming of age, it's like these pharmaceuticals both alienate them from their true selves, and they're alienated in the sense of, being on screens all the time, or, distant, alienated in the sense of like being distant from nature, but and maybe from their own inherent natures. And Hannah has this question of, well, what is it to be authentic, and what to be a person in the world? And because she has bad experiences with one of the pharmaceuticals that she has to take, valedictorian, she really starts to question this because she doesn't like taking it. And but I think that question of like, who am I and what is authentic was something that was driven by the reading I was doing, but also the sense of like, well, okay, what if you're having these experiences, naturally, is there a difference, like a chemically induced experience versus just, being a person in the world? And I guess, that was something that, she, as a teenage girl trying to understand where she is within the world, was like I felt like it was ripe to ask.
And it is ultimately a liberatory narrative, I think. Ultimately, it is about Hannah deconstructing all of the different influences, chemical and not, that are sort of swirling around her and pounding at her gates. And something that, and just, for a little bit more context, she's gotten to an age in high school where everyone is taking valedictorian in order to become essentially people who can be professionals in this culture, as opposed to less desirable sort of working class jobs. And so they're being prepared for being part of the middle upper class. Her parents dwell in that place. Her mother, Judy, is in fact coaches other parents about dosings and different aspects of wellness for their children and for themselves. We hear from Judy during the book, and we also get the point of view both in third person, close third, from Harold, and we are also given a lot of pharmaceutical marketing language throughout. We get side effects, we get lists of interactions, all sorts of things, the kind of copy that, if you are someone who does take any kind of pharmaceutical, you get every time you pick up your prescription. So as well as the kind of marketing that you noted before, where, you're just watching TV and perhaps you're on a streaming service that is not premium and you're interacting with commercials. And there's suddenly like just constant pharma commercials everywhere. And someone reminded me recently that like, it was I don't know if you know the particular year, but you didn't used to be able to advertise pharmaceuticals, period. And you can't in some other countries.
In the 90s. It was only, I think it was in like the 90s that they started direct to consumer pharmaceutical advertising. I interned at a company that did direct, or that contracted out to companies doing this and wrote patient inserts and just like the simplified things that you should know before taking for magazines when I was in pharmacy school. So I am well versed in that, and I suppose yes.
What was that like?
Oh my God, that was so it was in McLean, Virginia, which you, having grown up in the DC area, would know McLean, which is kind of this very wealthy area in the DC area office building. It was a bizarre space, but I think it was also it was run by one woman who had her PharmD, who had been doing this, since I think she had maybe even pushed for the direct to consumer marketing. And she was contracting out to drug companies. It was a small office. She fired all of the employees beyond us 3 interns in the first week. So it was very stressful. And it was also, I mean, for me, it was at a point in time where I really hated pharmacy school. Or I at that point, I had just realized like pharmacy school, this practice isn't for me. Maybe I can do something with pharmaceutical writing to make a career of this. And it was eye-opening in the sense that I was like, oh, this isn't the writing that like I've been dreaming about doing. But it was very much tailored to writing for a 6th grader's reading level. There were consultations with marketing and with legal. So it was like this group effort to develop. I mean, there was just so much energy and money that was placed into just writing up this brief summary of how the effects of the med, the side effects, and you don't want to make it too scary. So it was like this introduction into this world of like pharmaceutical advertising and marketing, but also the language. I mean, I think that's something that I really had fun with in the book, was just playing with the language of pharmaceuticals and pharmaceutical marketing, because it is just people in offices coming up with these names that sound kind of fun or enticing. And then like having a focus group telling you whether or not they'd, how the name sounds. So it's, and it's this language that permeates our culture in so many ways, that we read in magazines, that, just like it's a very specific form of ad language, but it's like fun and silly and also kind of absurd, because, it's just like talking about, the wonderful effects and then having to say, and this might cause death, like.
I love the names of the of the medications in your book. There's like Autorox and Delixir, and of course valedictorian, and they all feel totally credible. When did you decide that you were going to bring in this ad copy, bring in this information about the medications and intersperse it throughout? Like when did you realize that you wanted to include that? And how did you begin to think about like how you were going to have that, which is also balanced with sort of, there are like close sort of like lyric moments that are set off in a different type as well. There are, we have the sort of main spine of the book, which is Hannah's first person. And then we also have, as I mentioned before, we move into other POVs. So like, talk to me about how you learned sort of that the book wanted you to, or you required having so many voices, that you wanted to house so many voices within the book. And how did you, through the writing and editing process, sort of marshal and refine those?
So yeah, I think that the multiple voices stayed, that was an idea that I had from the very beginning, that continued throughout the editing process, that was something that was stable. I think it was more, the challenge that I had was figuring out how they worked together to create a coherent narrative, because as I wrote, I found that I was writing plot into the book, and that the language wasn't just this thin skein of language and this dialogue from the different voices that was carrying it, but that there was also more of a traditional narrative. So it was something that the pacing was a challenge to work out. I think I wrote many versions with, but Hannah was always, I think, the most present character. I would also say, Amanda, you were actually really insightful when you did read the book in 2020, because I remember we had a conversation about the book, and you pointed out, or there was just this revelation that I had when you were talking about how you could sense that it was both wanted to have this more poetic quality, and yet it was also more narrative based, and that it seemed to be somewhat trying to do both. And that was really insightful, because I was able to see that it was that I was trying to do both things at once, and that in that way I then tried to make the book like just to I guess to embrace narrative and plot, and to say, okay, well, this is what I've been doing. How do I have these five voices interact? And so I guess in that way, the pharmaceutical voice still has a poetic quality, where I think the others are generally more narrative based, but there is a third person section that is told from the town's perspective too. So that when the part that takes place at the factory.
Yeah, it's this genius thing that I think normally, I would say often contemporary readers have a lot of issue with POV shifts, which is so weird to me, because we all watch movies and TV where there's constant perspectival shifts. And in some ways, the movement of the book, the structure of the book feels very filmic to me. And so that when we do, we have been traveling along with this main character, with Hannah, but when we do, in sort of like moments of crisis or moments of illumination, move towards another character or get a sort of larger, as you mentioned, the Lumina Hills sort of POV, we start to understand better the world outside of our main character. And because you've so assiduously built this world, I think it creates so much more dimension and gives us as readers so much more information. So I don't think we have mentioned this yet, that I acted as editor for your book. And that's part of the reason why you invited me to talk today. But you're also an editor. You've edited many, many things as part of your publishing collective, Meekling Press. And I'm interested in what it was like for the editor to be edited over the last couple of years.
Well, I mean, to be edited by, I mean, you're such an insightful editor and writer. I mean, I do want to acknowledge too that you are a tremendous writer in your own right.
Thank you.
But and so I feel very lucky to have worked with you. In part because you understood the book in a way. I think, finding an editor who reads the book and understands it, both what it is trying to do and its possibility is just, it's like, that's a gift for a writer, because, it's impossible to read out beyond yourself or to be objective about your own work. I am very comfortable with editing, and there's a way that I'm very comfortable with other people editing my work if I feel like they are able to read the work and see its possibility. And so I think, there's a way, I feel this ease with reading and editing other people's work and being able to see it in that way that I don't feel like I have with my own work. So I think that also is one of the reasons why it feels like such a gift to have a good editor or someone who understands your work, because I think it's impossible, and you can't be both within the work and outside of it at the same time. So, sitting with, the same ideas and rewriting for 8 years, it's just like, there's no way to just look at the book objectively and see what exactly it's doing, because there's just that experience of, the desire of what to do with it. And it's hard to see the possibility. So I think, I think the process of being edited was interesting to me, because I was able to see the book in new ways and its possibilities in new ways, and to specifically for this book to make its narrative move, or at least in an attempt to make its narrative move more cohesively. I think there after the first time that we talked about the book, there was a way that I condensed the book into, into a narrative trajectory that I think made more sense. With the 5 voices, there were multiple scenes and such. So yeah, I mean, I think, it's I don't know, what's your experience of writing versus editing your own work? Because I know you actually have a very different perspective on being edited, I think, in some ways, in a way that I really respect too.
I don't know. What do you think that my perspective on editing.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess I will say that I know that there was a story of yours that I read that I had given you some feedback for, and you were just saying that you often don't invite feedback because it isn't like you're able to measure what you want. I feel like you have a determined idea of what is happening within the story, and it seemed to me that you really that fewer, well, I don't want to say fewer suggestions, but that, you generally have a pretty good idea of what you are doing within a work, and that you take editorial suggestions and weigh them against, are they in line with the work? But
yeah, I mean,
and
go ahead, sorry.
And perhaps find, other people's comments to be less than insightful most of the time because you have an understanding of the work, I think, or just a determined view. I totally respect that. In some ways, I had a really hard time in some ways in graduate school in workshop because I had too many voices, just and not that I necessarily, it caused me to question, I think that I'm someone who will listen to voices and respond to them. And, it was sometimes I had to like step away and just in order to hear myself think and write. And I think perhaps your voice is more dominant in the sense that what your voice is, and you're,
I think it could even be just a disposition thing. It depends, if I feel like, as it sounds like, luckily you did with this project, if I feel like someone reading my work understands what I'm trying to do, I am very open to their suggestions. I like sort of famously to myself, I once had a story edited for Noon by Diane Williams, and she, sliced very like enthusiastically sliced pages out of the story. And I loved it.
Right.
It made me actually laugh in joy when I opened the envelope. Yeah. And so I think it is about
That's
trusting
true.
your editor, which is always important.
Right.
But just for our last question, because I think we've got about time for one more question.
Okay.
I'm thinking about impressions and sort of self-definition and definition of others around you. And I'm thinking about Hannah's habit of creating these masks. She learns about memento mori or death masks in school, and she starts using these sensory input gloves to make portraits of herself and the people around her. And they are not representational at all. They're sort of gestural, abstract, and they come in different colors depending on the person, the mood, sometimes like what enhancement they have imbibed. And I became really sort of convinced, especially during my last read in preparation for this conversation, that it was for Hannah a way to sort of reach towards a kind of self-definition or to understand herself in the same way that a writer will try to understand a project as it's happening. So I'm interested in sort of like your understanding of this element and how you thought about it as it sort of permeated, especially the first part of the book.
Right. And I think that that's right on in the sense of I think there's a way that Hannah is trying to define herself and feels like she doesn't take up space. I mean, she's very aware of climate change and extinction and a certain awareness of transience or insignificance, and that actually coupled with a sense of alienation or loneliness. There's a lack of touch. There's a way that she very much yearns for touch and tactility, like in this world of screens, and in this world where she watches cams like chimp cams and animal cams. So the gloves are almost an excuse for her, or a way that she finds satisfies this desire. And at the same time, it is a way for her to make something physical, like so much in the world of Lumina is about facts and ideas and technology, and it's immaterial things, just watching video clips, and then the supplements are there to affect the ways that people feel and perceive, but it's a way that she actually creates a place for herself within the world, and I think and is able to have some type of artistic existence, if you want to say that, or and maybe artistic existence in the way of being able to create a place for herself within the world. I also think I was reading at the time about Beatriz Preciado's Tester Junkie, and she coins the term pharmacopornographic, and talks about how in society now we just create and sell feelings. We don't actually make physical things. So it also seems to be kind of in that sense, it's pushing against that notion of being in maybe of being in this undetermined place, and not being a young woman and not taking up space. It's a way for her to mark her presence,
which it could be argued this book does, in toto. Certainly. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Anne. It's been so wonderful to talk with you.
Oh, thank you, Amanda. Yeah, always a pleasure.
It's such a beautiful book, and I really encourage anyone who's listening to go out and buy it and read it.
Oh, thank you.
That's a perfect dovetail. Thank you so much, Anne. Thank you so much, Amanda, for being here. Please check out Anne's new book, The Enhancers. You can check it out at our physical bookstore, 1818 North Vermont Avenue in Los Angeles, or online at skylitbooks.com. Thanks again so much for being here. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Justin.
Thank you for listening to the Skylight Books podcast series. Please don't forget to visit our website at skylitbooks.com and make sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast for more author talks and bookseller conversations. You can find us on Podbean, iTunes, and Spotify. Stay safe and healthy, and we hope to see you back in our store soon.